The Calgary Flames are looking at a potential bonded pairing adoption as they move on from two of their defensemen.
You're Locked On Flames, your daily podcast on the Calgary Flames. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Locked On Flames. As always, I'm your host, Jess Belmosto, and I am joined by Nick Zararis today on this fine Tuesday afternoon. Nick, how are you doing?
I'm pretty good. We're getting into the point now where eventually we're going to see who's lying, which is always fun about this time of year.
Yes, and today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Today, we are going to be talking about potentially shipping Noah Hanifin and Chris Tanev off together, and why waiting and holding out really does help the Flames, while it just gives us the same six things to talk about as fans and podcast hosts. And then, of course, everyone's favorite topic that we have been trying to avoid, and that would be trading with the Edmonton Oilers. But before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed to Locked On Flames wherever you get your podcast, and of course on YouTube as well. We are here for you Monday through Friday, 5 days a week, your team every day. When Nikita Zadorov was traded, it was rumored that a lot of teams had gone after him and Tanev to be a package deal. Didn't work. The Flames knew that they could get more for Chris Tanev by himself. But now, Noah Hanifin and Chris Tanev have kind of, not only are they on the ice together, they're on the trade block together.
And you could add Markstrom to this conversation as well. There have been permutations of that trade with New Jersey where it's Markstrom and one of the defensemen. So no matter what, excuse me as I clear my throat there, no matter what, if you are the team with the multiple assets, you usually end up losing when you bundle, when you parse it all out for a few different reasons. And in this case, it's partly going to be because the other team is going to be taking back a lot of money, which typically means they're going to send you, for a lack of a better term, crap, so they can make the money match up. They're not going to give away a player who's making a decent amount of money, who's helping them. They are going to try and improve their roster by getting rid of an overplayed player who doesn't give them a whole lot. So that's the first peg of this. And then number two, the other issue you have is you don't get as clear of a price on each individual asset when you lump them together. It's why when you're haggling, you'll generally try and put two things together, and you'll get a better price for the two pieces individually than you would one piece by itself. If you've ever been to any kind of convention or card show, something like that, you generally will get a better price if you lump two or three things together as opposed to doing each thing individually, because you're more inclined. The person knows you're trying to make something happen, so I should try and help facilitate this, which doesn't always work in your favor as the person selling stuff.
Yeah, and we know that retaining salary is a big obstacle for the Flames, and probably why the deal with Markstrom and the Devils didn't happen when they were on the East Coast. And I understand from both sides, you know, why we should only have to take on this much versus, well, we just need to retain this. Like, it's bargaining, it's negotiating. I am so glad I don't have to do these things because I can't. I'm a pushover. So I don't think it's unreasonable to ask the Flames to retain a sum of Markstrom's salary.
So it's very different based on who we're talking about. Hanifin and Tanev, sure, that's only till the end of this season. Retain salary on that, it doesn't matter.
Right.
The issue with retaining salary on Markstrom is he's under contract for 2 additional seasons, and you can only retain salary on 3 contracts. So if the Flames were to trade guys again down the road, they would only have 2 slots available as opposed to the full 3. And when you're in this type of transitionary period, you want to have as much leeway and have as many tools at your disposal as possible possible. So it might not behoove you to retain salary, even if it's only a quarter. Even if you're only retaining $2 million on Markstrom's 6, that's not terrible, but you don't want to hamstring yourself as far as the amount of slots. It's not the money that's the issue. It's using the different slots. You can only retain up to 50%. He's under contract for $6 million. So based on how much of that you were willing to retain, it would parse out to being more in return. What did I write down here? The other thing I wanted to bring up here is, and you can look through the most obvious example of this is when the Rangers traded Ryan McDonough and JT Miller to the Lightning for the mystery box of assets. When you do the big trade like that, where you get like 4, 5, 6 things in return, the other team is passing the onus on to you to figure it out. They're not going to give you good stuff. They're going to try and give you bad pieces. They're going to try and give you stuff that you think you want because it's in the other team's system. That team knows those players infinitely better than you do because they've had them, 2-3 years since being drafted. So you're probably not going to get the maximum value you could if you bundled these assets together.
Yeah, and we talked about Tampa Bay last week and how they're so quick to trade off the prospects that aren't good. And we've seen Hanifin linked to Tampa Bay and Florida. So, you have to really question yourself. Is that something you want? Because they're willing to give you crap that they know is crap.
That's the thing. These teams know their own guys better. A lot of teams get guilty. They're guilty of getting hung up on their draft year evaluations. They think the player they evaluated at the draft, that they interviewed, that they put through testing, is the same guy they're going to get 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road. And that's just not the case. By that point, 2, 3, 4 years down the road after being drafted, a player is vastly different. They've gone through that team's off-season program a couple of times. If they've been to the AHL, they've gotten AHL training. So you're not getting what you thought you were. So that's why, especially, and we talked about this a few weeks ago in regards to Lindholm, getting prospects is fine because it's removing one step from the process of having to draft the players. But if you're not getting one of the slam dunk blue chip guys, which none of these teams other than the Devils really have, and even the guys the Devils have aren't slam dunks. They're good. Like some of them are in the NHL right now, but there's no guarantees when it comes to prospects and draft picks, which that's the conundrum you face as a team that's going through a transitionary period. You have to take on a certain amount of risk. It's a matter of how much risk is palatable.
Absolutely. And that kind of ties into this next segment here that we're going to talk about next about waiting. And is waiting worth the risk? Is moving way too early worth that investment in the risk? And we will be right back to talk about that right after this. NHL fans across the league are gearing up for the playoffs, whether your team is at the bottom of the standings or, the Canucks. You can use Sleeper to get in on the action, and Sleeper is the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey, because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. All you have to do is pick whether studs like McDavid or Crosby will record more or less than their Sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and more in a given game. To win 100 times your bet on Sleeper, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Flames fans. You can win 100 times your money playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. Thank you, everyone, for hanging out with us today on Locked On Flames. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast because we are vastly, quickly, rapidly approaching the trade deadline. And you're going to want to be here for that. So stick around. What makes waiting a good decision?
So as far as everyone else, that's the thing. There are teams right now that are going to use the next week and a half to decide if they're going to buy or sell at the deadline. There are teams that are really in rough patches right now. The Bruins are 3-5-2 in their last 10. The Lightning are 5-5. The Devils are 4-5-1. Dallas is 4-3-3. Colorado is 3-5-2. Those are all teams that are liable to add in the next week and a half. Then there are teams like Nashville who have 6-3-1 in their last 10. They're kind of hanging around a little bit more than other people thought they were. The Flames, 7-3 in their last 10, hanging around a little bit more than they thought they were. But that's ultimately the benefit of waiting, is the longer you wait, the more parties are involved. And, all it takes is one stupid, delusional general manager to set you up. All it takes is one guy trying to save his own neck, putting a little bit too much into the trade to get the guy because they really want them. I know Brad Treliving just got there in Toronto, a couple weeks ago, more or less, but that is not a market that is going to take well to, I'm trying to think of the word I want to use. A boring deadline, an underwhelming. Lackluster. That's a really good way to say it. That's not a market that's going to receive that well. The East is very wide open. Yep. Right now, other than Florida, there are no slam dunks here. Even Florida, and we talked about this a lot last season as far as the Bruins going into the playoffs, when only one team seems like they're going to come out of the conference, they're not coming out of the conference. So I expect all hell to break loose in the Eastern Conference this year, which means there are teams, come get these guys. But for the Flames, the longer you wait, the more desperate these people get. That's the benefit to the Flames of waiting. It sucks for all of us, but for the Flames as a team, it's driving up the price.
Yeah, it's like, you're just marinating these prime pieces of real estate, and someone is going to come in with an offer that is absolutely way above asking price, and you'd be a fool to decline it, but it's also a fool assembling the trade. So please give us all you have. Toronto they're such an interesting team because they go on heaters and then they'll just slam on the brakes and it's just a skid. Could they actually trade for any of the three that are up for the Flames?
Tanev, I could see. Tanev is the only one I could see making sense for Toronto. Hanifin as a rental, sure, but I don't see it there. And then I don't think they could make the money work for Markstrom, which is the reason. The Leafs the Leafs do need a goalie. That's not a crazy sentiment, but I think Markstrom's probably a little bit too expensive for them. I think if they're going to add a goalie, it'll be like a couple years ago when they added David Rittich at the deadline, where it was just somebody who could be the backup and play in case of an emergency. But as far as waiting, the one flaw of waiting is you can wait too long. You go too long, and then it's on you that you have to get the trade done. That's the one conundrum of waiting, where if we're getting to, 2-3 o'clock on March 8th, you got to get this done. And then the other teams know that. The teams that you're trying to make this deal happen with will say, okay, I'll call someone else if you don't want to bring your price down. You've got 2 hours. Either give me what I want or I'll call someone else and I'll find something else. That's the only real conundrum of waiting for the Flames. For us, it sucks because we want to talk about the team, but until we have clarity on what the team looks like, it's a real challenge because we don't know what the team is going to look like in a week and a half.
Yeah, and we can talk about, how these faces like Huberdeau, Kadri, Weegar, and Anderson are going to be the pillars of this next, retool, rebuild phase. But we don't know what else might be there or what might not be there in terms of, kind of the other players that are still on this team, of course. But like you said, holding out too long, it's kind of like when you are absolutely putting a paper off to the last minute and you see that that clock ticking and you're stressing. You're just throwing whatever you can on that paper. You don't want that. Craig Conroy has had how long to make something work, and it should be done right and well.
Exactly. That's the thing. We know that there is going to be movement. We know that teams are interested. We know that there are transactions that are going to happen. They can't wait that long. But the longer they wait building up to that, the more likely they can kind of pit some of these teams against each other. Like you mentioned, Tampa Bay, Florida, the Bruins, all probably in the market for Noah Hanifin. Other than the Devils, I don't know about Markstrom. Tanev basically could fit anywhere on any team that's a playoff team, so it's a little bit harder to forecast where he's going. I still think as far as Tanev, the ideal trading partner for the Flames would be Dallas, but Dallas would work, the Bruins would work, Carolina, I know, could use a right-handed defenseman because they haven't exactly enjoyed the second go-around of the Tony DeAngelo experience. So a player like Tanev, there's an infinite market for. Basically any team that's a playoff team could use him, even teams that feel like they're pretty solidified defensively, because he's adept enough where you could play him pretty much anywhere and you would be more or less fine. So that's the good thing here. It's not like the Flames have a bag of magic beans they're trying to pawn off on everybody else. These are genuinely good assets. Noah Hanifin is a number 3 defenseman on a Stanley Cup winner, and he could be a first pair guy, number 1 defenseman on a mediocre team. He's a good hockey player. Jacob Markstrom is having a Vezina caliber season on a very mediocre team right now. Any team that has goalie issues should be interested. And Tanev, as I just said, he can play anywhere, any situation, and he's not going to be anything you have to worry about.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, these are all like attractive pieces. These aren't just, oh no, we need to sell these pending UFAs off and we hope someone takes them. Like these are true key pieces to a team. And I really like Texas, or Dallas rather, for either Hanifin or Tanev. I mean, I think that would be delightful for both of them. But do the Devils like actually want Markstrom? Because apparently they were talking to Nashville about UC Saros.
I think they're trying to get an understanding of what it's going to cost to get a goalie, and then they're going to make an evaluation based on what it's going to cost, which guy makes more sense. Saros needs an extension after this year, which may or may not be cost prohibitive to a Devils team that's kind of locked up its core. You know, that's a team that's locked up Brett, Hughes, Heischer, Hamilton, and Timo Meier all in the last few years. Then they are still in a window where they're not dangerously up against the cap. They can still add guys and it's not an issue. But if you trade for UC Saros, he's probably going to ask for a contract that starts with an 8. And then, you know, we're talking about 7-8 guys that are all making over $8 million a year. And that's where you start getting into a roster crunch. Whereas Markstrom, especially if they can convince the Flames to retain even a little bit, at $4.5 million, $4 million, $5 million even, he's worth $4.5–5 million based on how he's played this year. For a team like the Devils that has had basically no stability in goal since Corey Schneider's first hip surgery, and that was when I was still in high school, and I'm 26 now. So for a franchise that's needed a goalie for basically a decade, I understand the aversion and the risk involved in all of this, but you got to take risks if you're going to win the Stanley Cup. There are no teams that are going to win a championship in any sport by playing it safe. You need to take some risks. And the Devils are desperate at this point. You know, they're 5 points back of the last playoff spot after losing to Washington the other night. They are really starting to get, losing to Tampa Bay, not Washington. But yeah, they are getting into desperation mode now where Nico Dawes is, 22, 23 years old. He has no business starting every single night. Schmidt hasn't worked out. He's, I think, 880 something save percentage. And Vanacek has been dinged up most of the season and hasn't played well when he's been healthy. So yeah, I think the Devils are the team the Flames really need to try and entice into making this happen, because the Devils are desperate and the Flames have stuff they need, and the Devils have a good system. They're the team I would like to trade with the most.
Yeah, and they're just dangling the carrot in front of New Jersey at this point. And I mean, it'd be nice if they finally, just snapped and did the darn thing. But coming up next, we are going to talk about another trade partner, this time a little bit closer to home in Edmonton. But first, we are going to take a quick break and talk to you about our sponsor, Camino Consulting. You've heard of our online families and couples course and taken advantage of the Locked On 25% discount running until the end of the month. But what about the live seminars? In both sports and business, the challenge in differentiating candidates and recruits is an endless battle. Everyone can demonstrate their measurable qualifications, but we all know it's about the intangibles that matter when those things are similar. Contact Camino Consulting for their team and management seminars to get a peek behind the curtain and watch your next recruiting class or hiring group become one of the most effective you have ever seen. Both because you identified the right candidates and because you've learned how to communicate and motivate them according to their own preferences. But you aren't in business management or working with a team. We pay referrals. Make some money making your workplace and favorite teams better. Every group works together better at the end of a year, 1 week. Every group works together better at the end of year one than week one. So contact Camino Consulting at caminoconsulting.ca and get on the fast track to understanding. Thanks, everyone, for hanging out with us today on this fine Tuesday afternoon or whenever you're listening. You can follow us on Twitter at Jess Belmosto and at Nick Zeraris. This is something I'm very interested in. And it takes me back to the summer of 2020 when Markstrom said, I'll sign in Calgary for less money rather than Edmonton.
Yeah, it happens. There are only a handful of teams that are this stubborn in their ways. I don't know if the Oilers could facilitate making a Tanev trade work as far as money. I'd have to look through their books to get a better understanding of what kind of retention they would need. But the Oilers have some picks. They have some interesting, not great, but interesting prospects. And we know Ken Holland's desperate. That's ultimately what you need to be thinking about if you're a general manager selling at the deadline. You need to think about who's on the hot seat in other jobs. And those are the guys you need to be playing phone tag with to be like, hey, just checking in. Are you guys still in on this? I've got other calls out. Just want to make sure you're still interested to give you an idea of what's going on. And I'm of the opinion you take the best trade. If the Oilers give you the best offer, you suck it up. And yeah, it's going to suck seeing Tanev on the Oilers for the rest of the regular season and the playoffs. They probably wouldn't be able to afford to keep him after this year, and he goes somewhere else in free agency. But I can understand the irrational, the passionate side of, well, no, screw the Oilers. We don't trade with the Oilers. I would rather not get anything than help the Oilers. I understand the people that are like that. I do. That's part of being a fan is irrational behavior. That's part of why we enjoy sports is we get to be irrational in large groups and we get to be passionate. I understand that. These teams have only traded 3 times in the history of the franchises in their current locations, all since 2010, so very recent history. We all know Neil for Lucic. There was a 2-for-2 in 2013, and then there was a 1-for-2 in 2010. So this is very infrequent, but it does happen. The Rangers and Devils traded once for the first time in their franchise history in like 2017, 2018, something like that. So it happens. If a team gives you a good offer, you got to do it. It's that simple. You have to put pride aside when it comes to acting in the best interest of the team.
Absolutely. And I think here again, like you have to remember that it's not like you are a true contender, like a true playoff team or anything like that. Like it's okay. Like this isn't true competition with, Tanev going or Markstrom going. Like it's not. It's okay. Yeah, it's going to be weird, but it's not like you're going to have to play them in the postseason. So just take your lumps. This is just the beginning.
You can't make a Tomlet without cracking some Gregs. To quote a wise philosopher, you can't make a Tomlet without cracking some eggs. So if the Flames are going to want to make something happen down the road, it might require swallowing your pride, trading with the Oilers, helping them in the interim if it helps you in the long term. Because the Oilers are worried about right now. The Flames are not worried about right now. So there is some ego in this. You know, we're talking about professional sports, the most egocentric, machismo-filled space in all of pretty much everything other than actual combat. This is as macho as it gets and stubborn-minded as it gets. I know Lou Lamoriello would rather die than trade with anyone in his division. But if you're a forward-thinking person, if you are willing to let bygones be bygones and make something happen, you can help yourself out, which is ultimately what matters here. I don't think the Oilers are going to make the best offer for Chris Tanev, but if they do, you got to take it. It's really that simple for me.
Yeah, and I mean, we literally just spent 10 minutes talking about how the Flames need to accept the best offer. So they should do just that. And even if that means number one, trading within your division, but also trading with like your biggest rival, like just suck it up. And I know that's so much easier said than done. And it's like the Red Sox and Yankees trading, like it's not encouraged, but these are we're going through it right now. The Flames are about to be in the trenches. So just get it over with, rip that Band-Aid off and make the most of those future assets.
Ultimately, it's about the team. When you are trying to build the best team you possibly can, you really can't worry about anyone else. When you start worrying about other people, that's when you start acting irrational. You can't worry about other people's perception of what you're doing. You have to have a plan, you stick to it, and you execute it best you can.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see how this all unfolds and where, Chris Tanev, Noah Hanifin, or Jacob Markstrom land. I think that it's fun because, number one, like they deserve to go, to contending teams if that's what they want. And it's fun. These are good guys to root for. Sometimes it's more about the individuals, or it can be, as well as the team. So good luck to all of them.
Yeah, it's that simple, man. There's a lot of moving parts to keep track of. Like I said, there's a lot of phone tag. There's a lot of things to keep track. We're getting there.
Yeah.
It's February 27th. The deadline is March 8th. We are getting there.
Yeah, that general managers group chat must be going crazy. Or it's silent because they're all moving in silence.
The stupid ones aren't. The stupid ones are the ones who are sitting down to do the interviews all the time. Like that's the sign of a general manager who feels like they need to convince other people of what they're doing when they're constantly doing features and sit downs. The GMs who are moving in silence, other than Lou, because Lou's
he's crazy.
I'm trying to think about. I'm not crazy is not the word I'm looking for. He's pretentious. Like he just thinks he's better than everybody else because he's been doing it for so long. That was the most PG word I could think of to use on the show. I was going to use another word, but then I remembered, oh wait, we're a PG show. So yeah.
Fill it in with your own words.
Yeah. Other than Lou, most of these GMs that move in silence, that aren't constantly doing the features, that don't need to tell the Athletic how smart they are, those are the GMs who are doing a good job.
Yeah. And we're going to see who may no longer be fighting to save their job, or they're going to be fighting for their life come the off season. We'll have to see. But thank you everyone for hanging out with us today on Locked On Flames. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts, and of course on YouTube as well. We are here for you Monday through Friday, 5 days a week. Your team every day. Congratulations to Andrew Mangiapane for playing his 400th career NHL game tonight. That's crazy. Nick, do you have any final words for us today?
Swallowing your pride is hard, but sometimes you got to do it for the better of the team.